We're in our Walmart yard. I'm going to show what we're up to. This yard went through the honey flow as singles. Must be a dud over there. And we are done treating with Apiguard here. The Apiguard is gone. We can tell by the cards that it's been gone for several days. And we're making these into double deeps. And we're coming up with frames from our entire outfit. And what we're doing is we are putting a division board feeder in every single colony. And of course most of them will remain singles. But because we're doing that, we are generating extra frames of honey. And we're going to take specific yards and turn them into double deeps. This yard is a good choice because the bees are in good shape and they can take that second box no problem. And they're actually ending up pretty heavy because most of the extra frames we're taking out of all of our singles are honey. Most of our colonies are pretty heavy. And also, let's see, we're also putting on a dose of probiotics. I know there is quite a bit of debate on these probiotics as to whether they work or not. And I'll be really honest, I can't swear that they do, but I think I see a difference in the bees when I use them. I've looked at some of the latest research articles and they're very interesting. Randy Oliver, and there's some stuff going on down at the University of Florida. And I've also talked to my friend Jörg Mayer over at the University of Georgia. And I do believe that there is some benefit to be derived from using probiotics. Now, I think next spring what we're going to do is probably create some controls and see if we can actually visually tell any difference in the colonies that are receiving some and some yards that we choose not to give probiotics. And then the other thing that you'll notice that we're doing is we're putting oxalic acid extended release pads back on the colonies. It's late August and we're going to put them on for a couple months, take them off later. I don't see a reason not to, honestly. I don't see a downside. We will be doing oxalic acid vaporization in midwinter like we usually do. And the pads will be off by then. I don't think I want to leave them on continuously. We'll probably take them off in our last inspection in early November or something like that. That'll put them on for, gosh, September, October, a little over 2 months. And we don't show many mites. I showed in my last video that we don't have many mites, but every once in a while we'll see a 1 or a 2 in an alcohol wash. And we're not feeding at this time. We don't have to. The bees are in pretty good shape weight-wise, and probably sometime in September, a month from now, we'll probably start to put some feed on and start to tighten them up for winter. You can see what she's taken out of this colony. It's just frames of honey. Selena, while I got the camera going, yeah, go right into the middle. I want to see what the broods are looking like. They're just starting back again. You can tell how they really shut down with the Apiguard on, and now they're coming back again, and the brood looks pretty fresh and pretty healthy. That's the one thing about Apiguard. It kind of cleans all the issues up that a colony might have. When they start laying brood again, they really look healthy, and this one does right here for sure. So those 2 frames of honey are going to go into another box, which will get filled up and become a second story. Obviously, we're going to have so many frames, we're going to have to take several yards to do this double deep routine on. I could store it for the winter. I could store it in a cooler or something like that, but I'm quite happy to make some of my yards double deeps again. Looking good. And of course you can see that these colonies have really shrunk in the last month. When we pulled the honey off a month ago, they did not look like this. They were jam-packed full of bees. This is what I expected to happen. Also, go over here and show something else. Right now is our last real hardcore inspection of the brood nest. We're looking at every colony, checking the brood, checking to see what the queen's up to, the size and the health of the colony. And any colony that is questionable, we're going to requeen it. And we're leaving the lids upside down on the colonies that need a new queen. I wrote on the lid, let's see, check queen, check Q 820, that's today's date. That tells me that we're going to requeen this colony, and we'll count them in each yard. So far this yard only has 2 and we're almost done. I expect 1 or 2 or 3, well, 1 or 2 in every yard that needs to be replaced. And now's the time to do it. Most of these colonies are pretty heavy. Even now in late August, they've still got a lot of weight in them, and it would be a mistake to feed them. We need to make sure that the brood nest doesn't get too constricted with food. We want to make sure they have plenty of room to lay brood for the next month, month and a half. So we got a few pollens starting to come in. I've got some Wingstem over around the corner. I'll go over and take a picture of that. That's really good stuff. So these bees are in really good shape. They're finished with their Apiguard treatment, and as far as I know, they're all good. Last time we checked, all the queens were there. But today is our last serious inspection. Every brood nest will be inspected. We will see how the queen is doing, and if we don't like her for some reason, we'll mark it and keep track of it in our little record book, and we'll be back with a new queen at a later date, probably within a week or 2. Well, we're starting to see Wingstem in bloom around some of our bee yards. Wingstem gives wonderful pollen for the bees. It's yellow in color, and if you got a lot of this plant around, they'll get a lot of pollen. In our neighborhood, it blooms maybe 2 weeks ahead of the goldenrod. I'm not sure they get much nectar out of it. It is in the sunflower family, and it grows wild around here. And this is just starting to get going. It'll go for 2 or 3 weeks, honestly. Nice little patch of it right here. And that's why we want all our mite treatments done, all the Apiguard treatments done. We don't want the queens to be shutting down when this pollen starts to come in, and it's just beginning to come. We're still doing a few mite checks, wanting to make sure that we're in good shape in all of our yards. Never hurts to check twice.
They're good looking pollen.
Yeah. Pretty yellow bees.
Yeah, these have got some Italian in them.
And these were the sassafras queens.
Yeah. So be nice. I don't have my veil on.
We're about to dump them in this.
Yeah, and then dump them in here. So like all the rest of our colonies, they're just starting to lay brood again. You'll see a little bit of sealed, but you'll see a lot of eggs and larvae in most of them. They're just coming back after the month-long Apiguard treatment, which really shut the queens down. You got eggs and larvae in there?
Yes.
Oh yeah. I'm going to back up before you do that.
Yeah, because you know.
You might want to
Drone, I ain't seen a drone in a minute.
Well, that was rounded off half cup measuring cup. So he's, from what I saw, it looked like he had probably 350 bees in there. How many mites you got, John?
1.
I'm comfortable with that. We give them the oxalic pads. I think they'll go into winter in pretty good shape. If I was seeing a 4, 5, or 6, we might be tempted to do another Apiguard treatment. Ah, it's not as heavy as the others. We're going to have to be on the lookout for that.
This one has a few drones too. In here.
And of course, with the Italian bees, that's more likely for them to not be as heavy.
Right, they eat a lot, don't they?
Yeah, well, they run a bigger brood nest,
Right,
you know,
right.
or more brood in the nest, I should say. I think the oxalic strips are going to be good enough to handle that. We do not need to use Apigard again. I want this yard to become one of our yards that's going to get the second story with the extra frames we're generating. For one thing, they could use the food,
Hopefully
and plus they've got plenty of bees to take care of the extra box, so we will make this entire yard double deeps with the extra frames we're generating. We're opening up a colony that has the genetics that we're producing through our Caucasian breeder queens. And I'm telling these guys that I'm going to expect a big difference in the amount of weight in them. And that first frame is showing it right there. So this is a big difference between Italians and Caucasians. And of course this is an open-mated queen, and I can see from here that she has a little bit of Italian going on in her worker bees, but there's also a lot of dark bees in there. And I'm going to tell you guys a story, something that happened to me a long time ago. About, oh gosh, almost 30 years ago, I guess. I had a bee yard up in Otto, North Carolina, and I did half of the yard as Caucasians and half of the yard of a bee called Starline, which is extremely Italian. It was a hybrid, and they had a reputation for making a lot of brood. And they were double deep colonies, and I put the Caucasians in half the yard and put the Italians in the other half, the Starlines. And in late July I pulled the honey. They'd made a good crop of honey, but it was very obvious looking across the yard that the Starline bees seemingly made more honey because every one of them had another super on them. And so I harvested the honey and spent a few weeks extracting, and came back in about 3 weeks to treat them and start to feed them and look at them for winter. Every Starline colony was starving to death. They had no food. They were running out of food. And every Caucasian colony, the ones that I thought made less honey, they all had 40, 50 pounds in the second box. It looked like they'd made the same amount of honey, but they just chose to put a lot of it in the brood nest. Okay. Whereas the Starlines, which were mostly Italian, did not do that. They created a lot of brood, just like that colony you were just in right there. They created a lot of brood, and it was a massive colony, but they had no food. In a double deep, you know, 2 deep boxes, they had zero food. And almost every Caucasian colony had 40 to 60 pounds in it. So that's a real good example of one of the differences between the two races of bees. Okay, I want to turn it over. Okay, I want to show a close-up. Now these are queens that we produce from Caucasian breeder queens, and you can really see the difference in the color of the bees themselves. There's very few bees that have yellow in them in this colony, and of course they'd have to have some because they're open mated, and we can't, you know, tell the queen what to mate with. So we always see a little Italian in our Caucasian colonies, but I'd say this is a good 80% Caucasian. And they're the deeper we get into this yard, the more it's becoming extremely evident that the Caucasian bees are so different. The brood nest is smaller, they have less brood in them, they're loaded with food, and we're not even going to feed them right now. We don't have to, and it'd be a mistake to do it. Whereas you walk over here and look at these Italians and you see all the yellow, they're loaded with bees. Lots and lots of bees, a lot more yellow. And we've got 2 pallets of these Italians in this yard, right here and right there. And we're having to make sure that they get a second story today with some food in it, because several of them have no food in them. And all the Caucasians are are turning out to have loads of food. Huge difference. John's got one there loaded with food.
I got a dud for that one for food.
Okay,
So
perfect.
John's got a queenless colony, and we're just going to take that whole box and just stack it on a good strong colony. Is it heavy, John?
Yeah, it's got some weight in it.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I'd take 2 of those frames out and then give them back their own 2 frames. And that's what we do with duds this time of year. As long as it goes on a strong colony, it's a non-issue. They will not bother that queen. That colony down below will take care of their own queen. Now, if this dud box was really strong, it might be a different picture. We might disperse the frames, a few to one colony and a few to another. But in this case, there's so few bees that that queen will be protected down below. We put a little red paint dot on all the lids where we installed these Italians so we could keep track of them. And these Italians are Saskatraz. These came from Ray Alvarez in California. He wanted me to try them out and let him know what I thought. And I think from a pollination point of view, these are probably really good bees. And honey production too. You just got to be aware of this trait that they're going to be needing feeding, at least in our neighborhood. These will be really good colonies to make nukes with next spring. And that's another point. When we make nukes starting in late March, these will be some of the first colonies we go to because I'll bet you they're going to be loaded with bees. I'm in a bee yard on my next door neighbor's property. Belongs to Jack. Many of you have seen Jack in some of my videos before. The plant guy. And I thought I'd take a little video in here and say a few more things about these different races of bees. We got a little bit going on in this yard too. We got a lot of our own Caucasian bees in this yard, but also you can see some yellow dots on some lids, and that's where we installed some pollen queens, P-O-L line queens. That line of bees was developed down in Baton Rouge, so I'm told, for commercial beekeepers mostly, or with commercial beekeepers in mind. They're supposed to be somewhat Italian, but you know, looking at the bees themselves, it seems like they're kind of a mixed line. They were chosen for good hygienic behavior, somewhat resistant to mites, supposed to be sort of gentle, which I'm all about. I don't want any bees at all in the future that aren't gentle. Just don't want anything to do with that anymore. So, you know, why do different races of bees have different traits? And it really comes down to evolution and what traits help them survive in their region. Of course, some of what we see today is really due to selective breeding. A good example of this is the original Italians imported into this country in the mid to late 1800s, which tended to be more of a leather color instead of the very yellow or gold color we often see that's associated with Italians. Those brighter colors have been selected over time, over decades, and the original Italians did not come looking like that. I believe that the Italians originated from the southern half of Italy, where the weather is fairly mild, and a colony might benefit from being large most of the time to take advantage of nectar flows that could occur anytime over a long season. Whereas the Caucasians, they really needed to be preparing for winter early and perhaps build up late because of a much shorter active season. And those traits suited their needs. They evolved that way. The Caucasian line we're using comes from the country of Georgia, where the greater Caucasus Mountains are on the border with Russia in the north, and the lesser Caucasus Mountains are in the southern part of the country. It's cold, high elevation, snow late, snow early, late in the spring, early in the fall. And these Caucasian bees really have a reputation for foraging in cooler and wetter weather than the Italians, and because of that, they could be a better choice than the Italians for anybody in the northern or cooler climates. The Italians do better in hotter areas with a longer season, in my opinion. That'd be places like California or perhaps Florida. Now, the Carniolans come from areas like Slovenia and Austria, and they have some of those ability to overwinter well type of traits like the Caucasians do, but they are a little different. They tend to be very frugal and are known to overwinter with smaller clusters, but they will build up really fast in the spring, which can kind of fool people. It contributes to their reputation for swarming, especially if you don't watch them. They almost explode. The buildup of these two darker races is more dependent than the Italians on the stimulation that is caused by incoming resources, especially fresh incoming pollen. Fresh incoming pollen is the most stimulative thing that I know of, even more so than fresh nectar. Now sometimes a cross can be better than any one race, sort of a best of both worlds type of thing. Well, maybe some hybrid vigor going on too. Back in my Oregon days, I used to buy Caucasian queens that were open-mated with Italian stock from an outfit near Redding, California. I really liked them. They were gentle. They were kind of best of both worlds with Italian and Caucasian. They still built up pretty big, but they overwintered on less food and didn't quite build up as quickly in the spring, which suited me. Queen breeders like Joe Latshaw in Ohio and others produce hybrid breeder queens that can be really good in my experience. There's lots of possibilities when it comes to raising bees, and again, sometimes the crosses are better than any of the purebreds, in my opinion, and we may be heading towards that sort of thing in the future. We'll see. Uh-oh. This doesn't look good. John, what did you do?
This is my fault this time.
For once, John was innocent.
Yep, okay.
John's innocent? Okay. It happens, it happens. I've done it too. Actually, it wasn't anybody's fault. These are these kind of weird barrels. They don't have any rings in the middle, and you have to pick them up by the top. And the top ring popped off. So, just one of those things. And no, we won't try to save this honey. One of the problems here is that it's going into our flower bed, and honey does kill plants. If it gets into those plants very deep, it'll kill them all and actually poison the soil for a long time. So far, it's only about 8 or 10 feet out there. All right, sticky mess.
Yeah.